Oh look, the hired hand finally decided to show up. She did not say it directly to my face. She whispered it to her circle loud enough to carry. She kept her voice soft enough to pretend it was a slip. I stood in that lobby in my best shirt and polished boots. In one heartbeat, 64 years of honest pride vanished. I felt like a foolish farmer wandering where he was not wanted. The woman who said it was about to become my son's mother-in-law. I turned toward the doors, one foot already moving to retreat. Shame easily shrinks a full-grown man back into a child. Then Caleb appeared, cutting straight through the silk gowns. He gripped my trembling shoulder and whispered 5 words. "Dad, trust me, stay tonight." I had no idea what kind of storm was brewing in that room. Neither did any of the wealthy guests sipping champagne. "My name is Thomas Miller, though folks call me Tom. I am 64 years old and steward 35 acres. It is the same land my grandfather cleared with his own hands. I spent 30 years maintaining heavy machinery before cattle. Nothing in my life was handed to me. Every penny was earned. My late wife, Martha, was the sharpest soul I ever met. She had a rare gift for reading a person in 5 minutes. Together, we raised 2 fine children on that red dirt road. Our daughter Sarah is 32, raising my grandson. Our son Caleb is 34, an engineer from Auburn. Watching him cross that stage was the proudest day of my life. When Martha passed 5 years ago, the sky collapsed on me. Some mornings, the silence in that farmhouse catches my breath. After her passing, Caleb drove to the farm every weekend. We spent Saturday mornings fixing fences and sharing meals. He was not just my son. He was my anchor in an empty world. 18 months ago, Caleb brought a woman home to meet me. Her name was Victoria Kensington, old Atlanta money. Her father, Sterling, ran a real estate firm downtown. Her mother, Evelyn, spent weekends on charity boards. When Victoria first came over, she smiled through dinner. Yet I remembered what Martha told me about watching eyes. When Victoria looked at my hands, I saw something freezing cold. It was not warmth. It was a cold, calculating inventory. Have you ever watched someone measure your worth in silence? I tried to convince myself I was just being overprotective. I swallowed my uneasy instincts and kept quiet for a year. I visited the Kensingtons once at their lavish estate in Atlanta. They had a swimming pool and a garage holding expensive cars. Sterling shook my hand like a chore he was forced to do. Evelyn asked about my small farm as if it were a pity project. Then came the engagement dinner at a luxury grand hotel. 50 wealthy guests gathered inside that marble ballroom. I arrived slightly late, wearing my cleanest suit and boots. That was when Evelyn uttered those sharp words to her circle. Oh look, the hired hand finally decided to show up. The room went quiet as discomfort rippled through the venue. A woman looked away fast while a man stared into his drink. Shame has a way of dropping a man into his smallest self. I turned toward the exit, ready to leave the insult behind. Then Caleb stopped me near the doors, whispering 5 words. I stayed and spent the dinner with Caleb's engineer friends. They were honest people who treated me with genuine respect. Yet Sterling kept glaring at me from the main head table. After the guests thinned out, Caleb led me to his truck. We sat together in the quiet darkness of the heavy cab. He took a deep breath and looked down at his hands. "Dad, I need to show you something critical before you react." He pulled up a list of 15 audio files on his phone. He pressed play on the very first recording without a word. Victoria's voice filled the truck, cold and unfamiliar. "Just 6 weeks, Mom, and then I am locked into the marriage. Once we are married, I will start moving on the land deal. Dad already has private developers lined up and waiting," Evelyn replied, asking about my potential resistance. What if his father refuses to sign away his family dirt? Victoria chuckled with a chilling coldness in her tone. "He will sign. Men like that trust their sons blindly." I felt the floor drop out from beneath my feet in that cab. My 35 acres sat in a highway expansion zone. The county had quietly approved the project months ago. Sterling used his real estate ties to uncover the secret. He calculated my land value would surge 10 times higher. He built his daughter's engagement to steal my legacy. Caleb had spent weeks secretly gathering these recordings. He even found a contract bearing my forged signature. "What are we going to do now?" I asked my brave son. Caleb looked me in the eye and laid out his payback plan. "Let the truth breathe," I told him. "I am with you all the way." The next morning, I met Devin, an AV technician friend of Caleb. Devin had already agreed to help us execute our secret plan. They told the venue staff the projector setup was for a surprise. They claimed it was a romantic slideshow of the happy couple. Caleb tipped the manager generously to guarantee total privacy. Everything was timed down to the minute for maximum impact. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my hotel room. I put on the suit I had worn to my daughter's wedding. I stared into the mirror for a long time, thinking of Martha. I remembered my father and grandfather working that hard soil. 3 generations of blood and sweat were baked into that dirt. A profound feeling settled deep inside my chest. It was not blind rage. It was pure, unshakable clarity. The wedding ceremony was set for 2 o'clock the next day. I watched the grand ballroom fill up with wealthy guests. The Kensington family arrived first, overflowing with pride. Sterling held his chest forward like a king entering a room. Evelyn wore a dress that cost more than my truck payment. Caleb stood at the altar in a tailored dark suit. His jaw was firmly set and his hands were completely still. I knew my son well. He was ready for what was coming. Victoria walked down the aisle in a gown with its own insurance. Sterling handed her off like a man closing a business deal. Evelyn caught my eye across the room and offered a smirk. I held her gaze directly and refused to look away. The officiant began the formal wedding proceedings. Someone up front started crying happy tears of joy. Then came the precise moment for Caleb to speak his vows. Before I answer, Caleb said in a level, commanding voice. His voice reached every corner of the room without shouting. There is something everyone here has a right to see first. The huge projection screen at the back suddenly lit up. The room did not understand what was happening at first. Heads turned in confusion as the video began to play. Shock rippled through the crowd as Victoria's voice echoed. Once we are married, I start working on the land deal. Dad already has private buyers lined up and waiting. Evelyn's voice asked, what if the old man resists us? Victoria chuckled with a coldness that chilled the room. Men like that trust their sons. He will sign it over. I was not watching the screen. I was watching their faces. A woman in the 4th row pressed her hand to her mouth. One of Caleb's close friends rose slowly from his seat. Evelyn Kensington turned the pale color of old paper. Sterling jumped to his feet, screaming toward the back room. Shut that thing off right now. It is completely fabricated. The audio kept playing loudly over his desperate shouting. Sterling's own recorded voice echoed across the speakers. The highway corridor gets approved and that land value triples. We need it in our name before the public survey drops. Victoria's voice replied, saying she would manage Caleb. Sterling added that he would manage all the fake paperwork. A heavy gasp moved through the room, thicker than smoke. Several guests on Victoria's side stood up and walked out. Then a third recording played, captured in a restroom. Victoria spoke about how hard it was to smile at me. I cannot keep pretending to respect that old handyman. Evelyn laughed softly, telling her it was only a bit longer. After the wedding, Caleb will distance himself from him. The entire elegant ballroom broke open into absolute chaos. Victoria started weeping hysterical, dramatic tears on stage. Those recordings are edited. Tell them the truth, Caleb. Caleb turned calmly to face the crowd of stunned faces. His voice was completely level and full of quiet authority. Everything you heard has been forensically certified. The land documents bearing my father's signature are forgeries. This entire fraudulent scheme has been running for a year. Sterling charged toward the AV booth in a furious panic. Devon stepped outside and locked the heavy door behind him. The screen kept displaying forged contracts and buyer emails. Then a sharp man in the 3rd row stood up very slowly. His name was Alton Burke, an assistant district attorney. He looked straight at Sterling with absolute authority. What I witnessed is clear evidence of criminal conspiracy. I strongly advise all 3 of you not to leave this venue. Evelyn began weeping openly behind her designer glasses. Victoria sank onto the polished floor in her expensive gown. She looked up at Caleb, begging for an unearned mercy. My son stood his ground, firmly protecting our family name. Police officers arrived at the venue within 20 minutes. All 3 Kensingtons were quietly escorted out of the building. Sterling was still arguing with officers, red-faced and furious. Evelyn hid her face behind dark glasses, weeping in shame. Victoria was led away with her expensive veil hanging crooked. The lavish catering sat untouched as the crowd slowly thinned out. Caleb walked over to me in the quiet, half-empty ballroom. The wedding food is already paid for, Dad, so let us stay. My daughter Sarah rushed into the room and embraced me tightly. She held my face in her hands and cried tears of relief. Mom would be so proud of both of you today. Daddy. I had to look away for a moment as my eyes filled with tears. In the weeks that followed, Alton Burke built a solid case. Forensic experts verified every single recording and paper. The investigation uncovered a shocking financial reality. The Kensingtons were secretly drowning in millions of debt. Their lavish lifestyle was nothing more than a dangerous illusion. They desperately needed my 35 acres to avoid ruin. Sterling already faced civil fraud judgments in 2 other states. A woman named Patricia Vance contacted us 3 weeks later. She had been targeted in a similar real estate scheme years ago. She courageously agreed to testify against the Kensington family. 2 more victims came forward with almost identical stories. Before the trial began, Sterling's lawyers offered a settlement. They offered $300,000 and a public apology. Caleb and I sat together in my quiet kitchen to discuss it. I looked at my son and firmly shook my head in total refusal. We said no because Patricia Vance deserved her day in court. We said no so no other family would ever be targeted again. The criminal trial officially began a few months later in court. The defense team tried to paint Caleb as a bitter ex-fiancé. They claimed he fabricated the evidence out of spite and anger. However, their weak arguments had nowhere solid to stand. You cannot argue against certified forensic voice evidence. You cannot explain away 5 victims sharing identical experiences. The jury returned a guilty verdict on every single count. Sterling received 11 years in state prison for grand fraud. Evelyn was sentenced to 7 years for her role in the conspiracy. Victoria received 9 years behind bars for her active involvement. The judge uttered closing words that I keep written near my window. She said their belief that dignity was cheap brought their downfall. She noted that measuring a man's worth by his address was their error. Caleb decided to move back to the farm full-time after the trial. He consults remotely now while managing our land and cattle. 2 years ago, Caleb met and married a wonderful woman named Tanya. Tanya is a down-to-earth soil scientist who loves the quiet farm life. She showed up to our 3rd dinner together wearing dusty work boots. She has never once made me feel out of place in my own home. They were married right here under the shade of our old pecan trees. 40 genuine friends and family members attended the peaceful ceremony. It was easily the happiest day I have experienced since losing Martha. Here is the deeper truth I have learned from this long journey. People who work hard to make you feel small are afraid of you. Evelyn called me a handyman because she needed to feel superior. She needed me small so her dirty theft felt justified to her. The mistake most people make is turning that cruel dismissal inward. Never ask yourself what you could have done to earn their respect. The problem was never yours. It was always living inside them. Truth does not ask for permission from anyone to break free. It just needs one courageous person willing to let it breathe. So I ask you, is there a room where you are making yourself smaller? How much longer do you plan on standing in that shadow? I am 64 years old with heavy calluses on my worn palms. I wake before sunrise, work hard, and sleep with a clear conscience. That quiet peace is the only real inheritance I ever wanted. Thank you so much for watching this story on the Revenge Hub. If this message touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to check out our other videos on the channel for more powerful stories.